We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management, archaeology, and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 196 for August 26, 2020. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about your social media presence and how it can help or hurt your future job prospects. So go check your security settings on Facebook and who you're posting to, because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. All right, welcome back to the CRM Arc Podcast, everybody. And joining me today is Heather in Southern California. I'm going to say Southern.
Hi, everyone. Central California.
Stephen in Calgary.
It's California. It's all the same. Anyway, hello.
and Bill in the United States.
Nobody wants to acknowledge him in California also.
All right, guys. Well, today, a topic proposed by our hosts is really your online presence, I would say, and how that can affect you negatively and positively. And we'll talk about some stories. Bill brought this up, but Bill, you've talked about personal branding, which is what all this leads to. You've had blog posts about this. We've brought it up on podcasts, and yet still some people don't seem to get that what they say in these Facebook groups and Twitter and other places. It's mainly, I think, probably Facebook. You know, you can share articles and stuff a lot easier than you can on Twitter, and people can comment on them and things like that. And when somebody comes in on, say, the Archaeo Field Techs group on Facebook and says, "Oh, I'm thinking about getting a master's degree in archaeology. What do you guys think about that?" By the time I see it, even though I'm a moderator, there's like 248 comments about why you shouldn't get a master's degree because all people with master's degrees are idiots, right? Oh, I worked on a project where the project lead didn't know anything. And well, okay, that's fine. Maybe they're brand new. That's still okay, but you don't need to come in and say that, all people with master's degrees are idiots because you just said that. And that's just one example. There's all kinds of stuff on there. Somebody comes in and says, "What kind of boots should I buy?" Oh my God. The first few suggestions are probably like, "Oh, I like these." And then after that, it just descends into madness.
So true.
Yeah. So Bill, why don't you just kick this off a little bit and talk about personal branding a little bit. And I'm curious to hear if you mention this type of thing in any of your classes at Berkeley, if this even comes up when people talk about careers and things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll tell you right away. Yeah, that's a central piece of, what I'm teaching here at Berkeley. But, one of the things I want to mention even beyond branding is just the reality of like professionalism. And I don't know if it's that people think they have a force shield because they're typing into their phone or on the internet, or there's some kind of idea that somehow they're anonymous or whatever, or I don't really know what the phenomenon is. I know I've read about it before, but essentially there's a lot of folks who think that just because they're saying something on the internet, that either it can be that kind of friendly banter between other individuals that's, not necessarily serious, but, it's the kind of stuff that you wouldn't say at work. And I'm not talking about folks who are saying things that are sexist or racist or discriminatory or whatever. I'm talking about how people just think that like the shoes are off, we're hanging on the beach with a cocktail and we can just say whatever we feel like saying. But then there's also this other aspect of people thinking that they can say things that it won't come back to them somehow. And that's really what I want to talk about right now, specifically before we even mention branding, because the internet is always listening, right? Like it's always recording stuff. And the things that get the most attention, whether it's good or bad, especially on something like social media, Facebook or something like that, are going to be the things that rise to the top of the searches. And they're also the things that are going to cause a disproportionate level of impact. So we can spend, I don't know how many years we've been doing, 7 years on the podcast here, trying to be positive and spread more information. But it only takes one person to complain, hardcore on the internet for all of the attention to go right towards that. And, there's good aspects of this, because you can definitely use the internet to enhance your career and to demonstrate, your abilities and your experience in a way that you really can't do on a resume. And that's where the branding part comes in, trying to get folks to get rid of these old social medias or overpower their social medias with professional stuff, so that, when folks look at what you're putting on the internet, they see that you're a professional, they see that that's connected to, your identity as an archaeologist. And, I'm not saying that you need to just take all your social media and make it just, one large CV, but I am saying that if folks are interested in hiring you or folks are interested in interacting with you, the internet provides a space that we never really had before. I mean, you can reach out to almost anyone through Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that, and you'll actually connect right to their phone, right, their pocket. They're going to see your conversation. You don't have to stand back and wait like at a conference behind everyone else. You can actually have a conversation right away with a scholar that you've been wanting to talk to just by reaching out if they're on social media. But the other thing that happens too is, by putting a bunch of things on social media, that person, that scholar, that company or employer or whatever can see you as the kind of person that, like you were saying, is solidly negative about boots, hates the fact that they do archaeology, but they keep doing archaeology, is discouraging to other people who want to do archaeology. I mean, it works both ways. You can put a certain image forth that will help you get hired and further your career and solidify your identity as a professional, or you can do the kind of stuff that undercuts your own career and kind of lists you as one of the ne'er-do-wells that isn't happy and is always dissatisfied and basically is, kind of a thorn in everybody's side. And so, the reason why this conversation comes up is because just this last week, since shelter in place, I've been on Facebook more than I'd like to actually say out loud. I guess I could look at my phone.
I think we all have
my screen time. It's pretty gross that I'm on there so much, but I think there's some people who are on there even more. Recently, there was a photo that was taken, and I'll have to look back when it's not my turn to speak, but there was someone who did an archaeological field school, and they excavated a hole that many individuals felt was deeper than the OSHA regulation. I mean, I felt like it was deeper than it should have been, right? And just immediately the responses of every single person was, this guy's breaking the law and he's a professor, and this is that dangerous, reckless professor stuff that I can't believe we're doing in 2020. Now, to be perfectly honest, I mentioned on there that I think that it wasn't, up to OSHA standards myself. But when I came back like a day later, there had been whole blog posts on this, and the guy's university was asking him to write a apology letter and explain things. And he was really getting ground down at a time when, of all the professors, including me, he still somehow got a field school to happen during COVID. Mine was canceled. He did it on campus, so students who are sheltering in place could just go to their local dig that was on campus. And he was providing professional experience and training for folks in a time when almost no one is getting that right now. But instead of saying, great job, good job of doing an archaeology, field school in the heart of a pandemic and getting students that all important field experience, everybody shot him down because of a photo that we saw on the internet, right? Just in the whiplash that happened to that, I was alerted to several individuals who have just constantly, I guess, been on Facebook. I didn't really even know who they were, but they've been writing negative blog posts or posts on social media. I mean, I didn't go search them down, but other folks were saying, oh yeah, this person is the kind of person who's driven me away from even being on archaeology social media. Right. Now that's devastating, considering that social media is a way for us to talk about archaeology, to connect with each other and to use this to work through problems. But if there's some folks who are so negative that a huge chunk of our people who could possibly benefit from interacting with each other is actually being driven away by people, I mean, that's horrible. Yeah. And then finally, the fact that this person had done so much stuff on the internet that, other folks thought was negative, that means that now in this world of only, between 1,100 and 20,000 archaeologists in the United States, many of those folks know this person is negative, and I know that's definitely going to affect their employment opportunities. So, the entire discussion today really is about, watch what you're doing, but also recognize that you can use this thing to make some good change, but you got to be careful.
That's the thing too, is realizing the power of social media. And sometimes sometimes people do need to be called out, right? Sometimes people need to be called out, maybe not in the violent way that social media does, but social media tends to have almost immediate results, right? Because the universities and institutions and employers that the people work for are so afraid of negative press, right? They're so afraid of some sort of negative image. And to be quite frank, there's 1,000 people waiting for your job, especially in academia. And they're waiting for that hole to open up because you guys, Bill, you guys keep pumping out PhDs, and these PhDs need somewhere to go, and they're just waiting for one of you to screw up. And so, when that happens, the university's like, great, we lost somebody, that sucks, but we're going to get somebody else right back in here, and hopefully we move on from it. And maybe that guy did break some OSHA regulations and put some people in danger and wasn't really aware of that and probably should have been in that situation, but it could have been handled differently. Heather.
It's so frustrating on Facebook. And I think that Bill kind of summed it up really well in the fact that, people just don't think straight, it seems. And it's like, I think people need to really think about how they're coming across. And if you were talking to this person face to face, I know it seems really simple, but if you were talking to this person face to face, would you be talking like that? And I don't think 3/4 of the people that, state some of the things that they do on social media would be talking that way if somebody was looking at them straight in the face. And so then the other aspect is that we need to kind of look at why are we making this statement? We mentioned this in the last blog post that unfortunately one of the negative aspects of being an archaeologist, we have a lot of know-it-alls in this business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people communicate that way on social media, and it's this gotcha, attitude of they want to catch somebody and doing something wrong. It makes them happy. And I think to myself, when my kids act like that, I say, you know what? Nobody likes somebody like that. You remember what it was like when you're in 2nd and 3rd grade and you had a kid, the hall monitor that was so excited to catch somebody doing something wrong? Like, think about it. And if your heart's in the right place and you're trying to make our field better, and you're trying to make sure that people that are in the field are safe, then, my approach, and I think it's a better approach would be to contact this person separately through Messenger and say, hey, did you realize this? Not this idea that I hate the terminology, but it is what everybody's using, the cancel culture. Like, number one, I gotcha. Number two, I'm going to tell everybody else that you're wrong to make me look good. And number three, I'm going to now destroy you. And it's almost like this entertainment value when people don't realize in the end, do you realize what you're doing? You're conceivably destroying somebody's career and life. And that can happen. And we see it all the time. It can happen with one post. And I just think people need to kind of chill out and give people the benefit of the doubt, and then also understand. So when I see some of these crazy posts on social media, I'm curious what this person is like. So I look at their profile. So when you click on their name, the first thing that comes up is not their profile, but everything that they have posted on that site.
Right.
So think about, I don't think people realize that. I think some people do, but I think some people don't. So as an employer, as somebody who hires somebody, I'm not doing that just because I don't do that to people that I think I'm going to hire, because that's a lot of work. But just when I'm going through social media, I see it and I can see all these posts, every single post that you ever posted on that site. I could be really damaging if you're acting like what Bill is explaining.
Right.
So when it comes to hiring, most employers, especially government agencies like, the University of California or, the Forest Service, they're strictly prohibited from using stuff from people's social media that can't influence your hiring decision. And if the applicants find out that you're using Facebook or something like that as the reason why they didn't hire someone, you could get sued. So,
sure.
We're strictly prohibited from using that kind of stuff, but it's archaeology. If you're on a Facebook group and you're checking things out and trying to give information to students, and then you keep hearing people time and time snipe down comments. You see them at a conference, you see them at, when they apply to your company, you're going to be like, yeah, this person actually hates CRM And
Right.
I don't know. And that is already in your mind because you already have made that decision. So I don't know where this actually falls. I guess I'd have to ask my wife, who does HR, human resources, how legal this is for you to have your decision influenced preemptively years in advance about someone's hiring status, right? But I mean, that happens is all there really is to it. And if people see your application, they know that you're a person who's always stirring up stuff on the internet. I don't think that's really going to help you when you're going to get hired. Whereas the alternative is true if you've been constructive and use that platform. And every time people see you, you're always, moving things forward and positive or introspective or trying to analyze things. And, you're not quick to judge others, right? So both the good and the bad can happen. I don't know how legal it is if you've already had a bad interaction with someone and there's other candidates, all things being equal, and one of these individuals is actually a bad apple, but the other ones are disqualified. You're not going to choose them, right? But I do know it's against the law for you to go on Facebook and look at people's applications and weed them out using that.
I never do that. I've never done that. First of all, it's too much work. And second of all, I don't know how you would find it. People have all these monikers that they use, but it's never something I've ever done. But just think of it from like a logical perspective. So if I was in the bar before social media ever existed, and I went to a conference and I saw this guy who was acting like a complete jerk. Just one scenario, he's acting like a jerk to these girls, or he's saying some things that are really inappropriate, or a girl is saying some inappropriate things about guys. It's just unsavory behavior, which let's say as an employer, don't want to have representing my company. That is definitely going to sway later when I see their application come across my table. I have a right as an employer to consider those things that I've seen. So you're right. You can't just go and look on Facebook and just for the specific purpose of weeding out or researching somebody of an application that comes through. But it's in the back of your head. And this is a small world. It's unbelievably small, and it's just not a smart move. And on top of that, it's not productive. It's so negative. You're drawing yourself down. You're not. Your position's not going to get any better if all you think of and focus on is negativity.
Well, we're not going to end on a down note, but we are going to end this segment on that note. So when we come back, we're going to continue talking about this because I've got some thoughts around what you guys said. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a minute. While you're listening to these ads, just remember that we are doing lots of fun things at the Archaeology Podcast Network, and we've got an awesome new platform. So if you want to advertise a job, advertise a grad school program, advertise your company just in the awesome things that you guys are doing, and you want to support us in the same time, contact Madison at advertising@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Back in a minute. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code CRMARC. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Welcome back to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 196. So we're, of course, talking about social media, and it's interesting that you guys are talking about reviewing somebody maybe a potential applicant or something like that, or rather not doing that on their social media profiles. But honestly, I don't know how you can not, to be honest. And I'm saying that only because I'm about to post. I was just waiting on some clarifying information, but I need a third person on a crew. I've got 2 already secure, and I need a third person for a project starting in September. But I have very specific requirements for them. And one of the places I'm going to look for them is on the Archaeo Field Techs group, because a lot of the Archaeo Field Techs people are, for whatever reason, Western States archaeologists. So I have a good shot of finding somebody that can, spend a month in northeastern Nevada and has MSHA. That's kind of the clincher there, and can camp, because we're very remote up there, and driving back to Elko every day is just not going to be a thing. So anyway, I'm going to be looking for that. And to be honest, if somebody responds to me on that Archaeo Field Techs channel and says, yeah, I'm interested, well, I'm probably going to click on their name, just like Heather has said. You know what? If their last 15 comments were, get out of archaeology, it sucks, don't come back here ever again, I'm probably not going to hire them. I'm just going to say that right now. Like, I don't even know what the legalities of that are, but just as a person, as a human being, it's probably not somebody I'm going to want to work with, which, to be quite honest, and Stephen and Bill know this because we've been friends through this podcast for a long time now. And when we first started this podcast, I feel like I was emerging from my frustrated, hothead, young career stage. I made a lot of mistakes. And there's probably a number of people out there that see my name on something and say, yeah, I'm never hiring that guy because of something I did 10 years ago. Right. And I'm fully aware of that.
10 years or 10 minutes ago?
Well, sometimes it's 10 minutes ago. But, the thing we have to remember, and this is what I was thinking when you guys were talking, is archaeology is one of those uniquely situated fields where one project you could be a field tech with somebody, and on another project that person could be your crew chief, and then on another project you could be their crew chief, right? And at that level it goes back and forth, because crew chief is typically a position where you don't need a graduate degree, and people will go back and forth on that. I mean, once you start doing more and more crew chief stuff, you'll probably keep doing that, but you might be a field tech on a big project. And so people friend each other, because they're your actual friends. We don't have a lot of friends outside of archaeology in a lot of cases, because you're traveling around and that is your circle of friends. And then when those friends go to grad school or they do something else, and now they're principal investigators or project managers, maybe one of them starts a company. Now you're personal friends with these people on Facebook, and they can see your personal stuff. Whereas I've got another friend who's not in this field at all, and he's been working around different jobs trying to find what he wants to do. But every single time, man, his running commentary, he's a amateur comedian as well, and his running commentary about customers and people he works with is hilarious. And it tells me that he doesn't friend any of those people on Facebook, because if they saw it, he'd be fired. And it's phenomenal. Stephen.
Yeah, I think this kind of brings up a really important point about like social media and the internet and stuff like that, is that the way these things are structured, it's really hard to like differentiate the different roles in your life. Like in person, in the real world, in meet space, right now I'm sitting at home and hanging out with my cat and talking to all you guys and like hanging out with friends and stuff like that. But that's an entirely different situation than if I were, I don't know, at the beach, or if I was at work, like actual work, like, where I'm wearing my PPE and stuff like that. Like the rules of behavior are different depending on contextual circumstance, right? Like where we are, am I supposed to be professional? Am I supposed to be somewhat formal but polite? Am I supposed to be, is it kind of like, kicking the shoes off and hanging out? What goes on really depends on the situation. And social media doesn't do that. I think for most people, most of our personal things, like personal accounts, your Facebook page, stuff like that, is in fact perceived by users, including all of us, as hanging out with friends. Like it's personal sphere, right? Unless we have a commercial page, which kind of splits it off. But at the same time, it's like if I'm like hanging out with like-minded friends and joking around about stuff, and employers don't necessarily like respect those boundaries, and they're like, well, you said this on Facebook, and I said, yeah, like I was having a beer, it was Friday night. I was hanging out with friends. There is levels of acceptability even then, but at the same time, like the understanding that, like if I'm doing something in the professional sphere, like a company blog, or I don't know about you guys, but I actually have like 2 different Twitter accounts. One is Archaeology Focus, which is nominally more professional, and the other one's like literally just hanging out with friends. We need to both socially and technologically come up with ways of actually reflecting how people behave. Multiple roles are a thing. Multiple roles are an acceptable thing. And we need to figure out how to enact that.
I agree and disagree, but maybe I'm not understanding fully what Steve is saying. But I mean, it's some really, really good points there. I go back and forth. It's not, there's this what it should be, but also, part of this podcast is kind of the realism and what it actually is, the reality of it. And, on social media, should people hold against you what you say, let's say politically or in other ways? If you, have kind of a weird, I don't know, you do cosplay, or I'm just trying to like pull out different things that you like Star Wars, and somebody else, should these things be held against you? They shouldn't, but some people make assumptions. And, in Anthropology 101, we talk about code switching, right? So when you're with different people, you talk in a different way. Well, I think people get lost. I've got like 700 friends, and, it's hard to keep track of who is on there. And it's usually because they've invited me. And, it's hard to keep track of what, if you have something like Steven's saying, where you have 2 different accounts, that's one thing. I think that if we're helping people in the business, it's really important to either have a separate account, or be put everything through a filter. If you don't want to have a filter, that's up to you. If you don't want to have a filter, that's great. Make another kind of moniker for yourself. A lot of police officers do that. They have a separate name because they don't want to be found by the public. And so they make up a name for themselves so they can still be on social media, but and not be, kind of be anonymous and just have their friends. But I really think that that's important, because you know what, whether it is the way it is, whether somebody holds against you, your political views or whatever, whether that's right or wrong, it's reality. It's going to happen. And I think here's another thing. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. And, I've had a couple people that work with me, and, even off of social media, they make some pretty crazy statements about people or assumptions about people based on their political persuasion. And as a professional, when we are out in the field, it's important. You don't know who's around you. And these are customers. Okay. And it's really important that we just try to keep everything professional. And I think that if you're allowing customers to friend you on Facebook, you have a responsibility also as a professional to remain professional on social media, and not make some outlandish statements of not, you can believe whatever you want to politically, let's say, if that's what you're talking about, but to not make these assumptions and attacking statements about other people because they believe a certain way, because that is a real good way of not getting any more work. And it's a real good way of losing customers. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah. And I got to say, I agree with you, Heather. It is reality. It is what somebody is. And I kind of disagree with you, Stephen, because I think that space that you're in, if it's a space that somebody can see, then you should be held responsible for it. And it doesn't matter if you're hanging out with, quote, your friends. If your friends are the ones that, are hiring you or recommending you for a job or something like that, and this is the space that you live in, I liken it to, and it really is appropriate to today's conversations, but I liken it to, let's just call it casual racism. And everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? You make those jokes amongst yourselves, and whether it's, with your significant other or other friends at the bar, and, people make those, quote, funny jokes. And yet, if somebody were to walk in that you're making fun of their race or something like that, Well, you don't make them anymore unless they do, right? And then you guys fall back into it. That happened in the Navy all the time. I traded jokes with this African-American friend of mine. He would come in with white jokes and I'd come in with black jokes, and we'd just try to, make each other cringe. That's how it was when I was 19 and in the Navy. You know what I mean? But I'm held accountable for that. If I'm saying those types of things, quote, amongst my friends or at the bar or something like that, it's still my opinions. It's still who I am. And you can't separate that from the who I would be at a work site, or out on a project or something like that. That is who I am, So I just if that stuff is available to be seen, then you're available to be judged by it. I think that's just how it is in this day and age.
Not that it's right, but unfortunately it's the reality.
Well, I think part of it is if we can develop systems where I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I understand that in Facebook you can actually limit who can see what. Like you can classify your audience.
Well, you can curate an audience, not just by friends or friends of friends, but you can say you can create a group of people and say only these people will see this post, and only them will see that post.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like basic permission groups, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Like in that case, the mechanism is there to maintain, like, this is me joking around with my friends. And then you've got the one where, there are clients or bosses or coworkers or people from, the more professional setting. And maybe you have another group of people, from church or whatever. It's, it's a doable thing. And as such, then it is on you because, you don't make bar jokes when you're hanging out at church, right? Like it's
right.
Understanding the situation and the, what the context is partly on you. Likewise, like if you can use these settings in an appropriate manner, then, you should be able to avoid many of these mishaps. I will add that I really don't understand the concept of friending a client online, like outside of LinkedIn, right? But that's professional sphere. That's like, hey,
that's
thank
what
you for
LinkedIn is
hiring
for.
us. You should hire us again.
It happens though. I'll say I can think of just a few times where, let's say, an archaeologist, you guys work together, and then all of a sudden they end up working for an agency, and sometimes that, those lines are blurred because archaeologists move around. And then you have friends like where I am, it's a small area. And so, you have friends that then become clients. You just never know. And especially now, people are either way out there with their opinion or they're very quiet about their opinion. And so you don't know. I just think, people have a right to put themselves out there the way they want, as long as they understand, like Chris was saying, that, sometimes there's going to be repercussions that are not positive as a result. And if you're willing to hang your hat on saying something that is just kind of off the cuff and not being afraid it's going to, affect you, I guess you have to kind of weigh those things out as a professional. And I think for me personally, to me, it's not worth it, but everybody has a right to make the decision that they want. So as long as they understand, it's consequences.
Consequences. All right. Well, on that note, I think we'll end just a couple minutes early because we had an internet issue with Bill. So we're going to hopefully get him back in segment 3. So because of that, we're going to end a little bit early, and we will be back shortly to wrap up this discussion. In the meantime, go post something awesome about this episode that you're listening to on social media. It just makes you look good. All right. Back in a second.
Love it.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. Welcome back to this final social media worthy posting episode of the CRM Mark podcast. Not final episode of the podcast. Wow. I scared everybody there. Final segment of episode 192. We were just talking about in segment 1 how much of a professional I am, and then I screwed it all up. So we're going to keep that in though. So anyway, we're talking about social media, and I guess your presence and what things look like over there. And Bill, we lost you for the last half of that last segment. So why don't you catch up with some comments now?
Yeah, back in California, I have PG&E, so I guess we're lucky to have lights here. All right.
Be careful what you say. Are they a client?
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to delete. No, we'll leave it in. The thing that has changed, though, over the time that we've all been in archaeology, because we started off in the pre-social media days, where if you said something messed up at a conference or at the bar or hanging out with other archaeologists, that was the way that folks evaluated your character, right? So when you were drinking and you were acting out and then you said those crazy jokes and some people didn't laugh or other people did laugh, that was the time that you were being evaluated. But nowadays, it's like all day and all the time, because if you're putting stuff into social media, it lives in there forever. So you really don't have any privacy unless you do what Steven's talking about, have two separate accounts and never let the two mix together, right? So that's really the only way that you can have any kind of separation. But the other thing that has kind of changed is like the immediate response and the motivation to very quickly jump on, judge, evaluate, and go after people with very sparse, evidence. So that's the other thing that's kind of changed. So, there would have been a time where someone said something ridiculous after having a bunch of drinks and, you could tell them that wasn't funny, or you could talk to them or whatever. But based on their response to that, you could decide whether this person was someone you wanted to hang out with or whether they were a liability for your company or not. Now it's like you don't have that space or that time, that break in between. There's no time to pull someone aside and say, yo, that was messed up. You really shouldn't be saying that kind of stuff or putting those kind of things on the internet. I'll tell you what, let's delete it. And you can demonstrate you're sorry face to face. That doesn't exist. So what we have is folks putting stuff in there, no matter how fired up or whatever their motivations are. And then we're all very quick to immediately respond. So rather than, taking a few days or deciding that you don't want to talk to that person and years later have a conversation with someone you didn't think that was going to be, have anything in common with you, there's no time, there's no space for emotions to wane. And then all of our clients and all of our companies are so risk averse that they feel like they must act in this minute. So having an investigation or whatever on harassment or something like that, sure enough, we have a lot of problems in archaeology. We need to have those investigations, but folks want people fired immediately for the absolute, slightest things. And I'm not trying to say that we don't have monsters that are actually harassing people and causing problems to many people in archaeology. I'm saying if you write a post on social media, there's a movement right away for you to get fired or for you to go away. Yeah. So I think that a lot of people need to be really wary of that too, that we don't live in this day and age where, folks are going to forget. There is no rug to sweep it under. Like that stuff is all out. It's always right out in the open. And the people that you're trying to work with have a lot of motivation to immediately evaluate you based on that.
I feel like that's not entirely true. In the case of like, if it's one of your friends and they make a statement online, it's entirely possible to say DM them and being like, hey, I saw that post. I think you should probably take it down, and here's why. That I don't think it's coming across the way that you intended. Also, it is as a follow up because people keep screenshots keep screenshots as receipts. That instead of just immediately deleting something, maybe you edit over it or, respond to it or, and explaining like this, like was poorly worded. I didn't mean it this way. Or like, I didn't think it'd be taken in this way, or I don't know what I was thinking. It was a stupid post. I'm sorry. It's been explained to me why this is an issue. And it's perfectly okay, or it should be okay to apologize, right? To take something down and apologize. And along those lines, if I send somebody to like a DM to someone I don't know at all, that's probably going to go a whole lot of nowhere. But if I did to, like, say Chris made a tweet, not that he tweets much anymore, but like if Chris tweeted something and I was like, dude, that I don't think that's what you meant to say. Like that helps. Like that's part of the social process.
You're right. I don't tweet much anymore. It's really just a lack of time, to be honest. I'm on Facebook because of the APN and some other stuff, and it's just easier to be there. But that being said, it really irritates me when people take the first comment on a post that, whether it was something you probably shouldn't have said just for, ethical and humanitarian reasons, or whether you've got some sort of glaring spelling error or something like that. Do you have to say that in a comment? Because it's probably going to get fixed, right? Like I'm going to go in there and re-edit, or I'll do something. But do you have to call it out in the first comment and not just DM me and say, hey, you had a spelling error over here? That really just irritates me. But that's the kind of reactionary thing that we're talking about on Facebook anyway, right? People just type in the comments, not realizing or not caring that the whole entire world can see that, or at least your friends list and whoever you've got shared with. And I don't know, it just makes you look stupid. And it's like, are these my friends, the ones that are going to make me look stupid and call out my spelling errors? Now, if it's a funny spelling error and, they're a academician or something like that, and they're constantly like, I'm friends with Grammar Girl, like the legit Grammar Girl. She lives down the street here and comes to the Reno Collective all the time. She's Grammar Girl, right? Like she's known for her books on grammar, which doesn't happen often, but when she makes a mistake on Facebook, oh man. And she leaves it up because she's like, yeah, I make mistakes too. But people nail her in the comments for a grammatical error. Like I said, doesn't happen often because she's pretty good, but it happens to all of us. And just like, as a courtesy, maybe mention it in the messages rather than in the actual comments. Sorry, I had to get that out.
I totally agree with you. I think it's hard because, we used to, the concept of spinning, we're constantly thinking about, okay, how is this going to, if I say this, I live with two teenagers and that's their constant thought. Before they say or do anything, they have to look at it from every single angle. What is this going to do? How is it going to affect me? Who's going to think this? Okay, well, this person's going to be okay with it. Okay, but this person won't be okay with it. But if I switch it for that person, then the other person who was okay with it is not going to be okay with it now. So we're on like this defensive mode. And, what I think is lost in the process is just goodness, kindness, and really just being purposeful, I should say. Not defensive, if that makes any sense, because obviously you're being defensive on purpose. But if you have to think about every single thing, maybe you need to think twice about what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have to really start thinking about how you look at the world. If you're constantly thinking about everything you have to do to protect yourself, that's kind of normal for a teenager. But as an adult, maybe it's time to really do some self-reflecting and think, you know what, maybe I'm just talking about the wrong subjects here, or maybe I just really, need to, reevaluate myself. I already said that, but I did I do have a question it is related to social media, and it's related to just kind of like ethical. I know we brought this up when I first joined the podcast, and that is about posting details about your work on Facebook. And it is a pet peeve of mine to the point where I encouraged people I've worked with in the past to have a social media contract with people that work with you, because there's so many people that are posting pictures of artifacts and they're not smart about it, and people can clearly see where they are, and then they're not controlling. They don't know the filters, like Stephen was mentioning. They don't know the filters, so now the public can see where these artifacts are. It's unethical. As an archaeologist, it's unethical. We're supposed to be protecting these sites, and then because people want to show off what they found, everybody, it's cool, but you got to do it in a really careful way. And that to me is even more of a problem than a bad attitude, is somebody who's not careful with the ethics. What does everybody else think?
I think we know a guy who can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I think I know a guy who wrote a book chapter once talking about how not to do that.
Indeed. Yeah. If everybody hasn't read my story about, is that actually in the book? I think it is, right?
It's in Blogging Archaeology. I use it in my class, my historic artifact analysis class. It's course reading, my friend at Cal.
That's awesome.
Oh man,
that's awesome.
You sell more books.
I know, right? Hey, we don't sell that book. That's a free book. So,
well, that's why it's used
for,
at Cal, because they never buy them anyway. So, no, they'll buy them, I guess. I don't know. I don't ask them. I never ask them to buy books.
Now, Blogging Archaeology was a collection of papers, which I think myself and I think Stephen and Bill, you're both in it as well, aren't you? Because you were in that session, weren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't remember if my paper got included.
Well, that year is like
so.
one of the only times I've ever met you face to face, Stephen, in 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Well,
and face to face, I had to like stand on a box. So
he doesn't know I was already standing on a box.
Right. No, Blogging Archaeology is an ebook that Doug Rox McQueen and I put together. I think it included other presentations too, other papers or other contributions that weren't just at the SAA conference in the session that we organized back. I don't even know how long ago, a long time ago at this point. But you can find it on. I mean, if you just type in Blogging Archaeology, I think you can find that. It's a free ebook on some website. I don't even remember where to find it. But yeah, I told my story of, it was back when I started my blog, and in fact, I think it was post number 5 or 6 or something like that. To your point, Heather, I was talking about a project we were on because I was pretty excited about it. I was interested in sharing about archaeology and sharing our experiences. And I talked about the town of Tonopah that we were working in. There was a lot of cool mining history there and just stuff I found on their website. Right. And Bill's giving me the link here. We'll link to it in the show notes. 2014 is when we did it. I was just talking about that, and I actually included some pictures I had personally took of, I think one was a fire ring, just a ring of rocks. I don't even know if the thing was prehistoric, to be honest. It was probably some ranchers that made it the last weekend before that, but we called it a feature. And then just like some overview features. Now, this was all BLM land too. So it was all public land that we could have gone to after work. There's nothing saying we didn't. And I was using publicly available material, and yet I was fired for that blog post. Yeah, I was fired by email. And like the email subject line, when I saw it pop up on my phone as a notification, was details, or what is it? It's just something like the details of your termination. I was like, wait, what?
I don't even want to open that.
Right? Like if I don't open it, I'm going to work on Monday.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was at the airport picking my wife up, and so I was like, "Hey, honey, by the way, I got fired," and she quit the day after I got fired. So because we were working for the same company, but yeah, so I got fired for that blog post. Now there's always extenuating circumstances, and some of the extenuating circumstances was we were not enjoying our time there anyway. Right? That company had a lot more issues. I don't think we were, like I said, I was still coming out of my I'm not going to stand for this crap sort of attitude in archaeology. And I mean, I still kind of have that, but I'm a little better at dealing with it. But, it was a thing, and it can happen, and they can fire you for pretty much anything like that. And I think the actual company regulation was some sort of non-disclosure thing, even though it was all BLM land and you might think it's okay. When you're working for the client, when you're working for a company and for the client, it doesn't matter who owns the land. It doesn't matter if you're on TV while you're doing it. If your contract with them says you can't talk about the stuff that you're doing, well, then you can't talk about the stuff that you're doing. And you signed that when you started. So, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, Stephen.
I feel like something that's generally lacking in CRM archaeology, which is like the topic of the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. We're really bad at training. In general, like we expect people to be able to fill out our particular forms correctly. Well, it's like, here you go, fill those out. And it's like, well, there's no instructions, there's no training, there's nothing. It's like the idea that all of our forms are all the same regardless is kind of ridiculous. But beyond archaeological training, which we don't do, we don't do any sort of professional training. I don't know really how to put this. It's kind of like what sticks in my head is I used to work as a contractor on a military installation, a couple of military installations actually, and we would have to go through OPSEC training, like which 99% of like didn't apply. Like like I'm digging holes in the woods. I am not like taking pictures of like super top secret training installation equipment or anything like that, right? There is a certain notion of what's acceptable and what's not, and how much is giving too much away to, like for the military, it's the adversary, but really it's to the public, right? Like you don't necessarily want to communicate more than what you're intending to communicate. Kind of as a result of that, I take 30 photos a day on my phone. I do have location turned off, and I post, I don't know, one every 3 weeks on the internet, because I'm like, oh, but you can see that barn in the background, and it's pretty obvious where this is, or like oh, there's a major landmark right there, or like in a lot of cases, it's like, I'm not from the area. I don't really know the major landmarks, but that building's awfully distinctive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like most of my like in the field things are either close-up shots of like, I don't know, a duck, or it's like this, really weird landscape where you can't actually see anything except like ground and sky or something like that. Right. Mm-hmm. Because I'm trying really hard not to inadvertently, show you where I'm at, or, who my client is, or, okay, like if I get a projectile point in a shovel test, I might take a photo of it sitting on my, on my field notebook or something like that. But like, you can't tell where that is, or what project it's for, or any of that sort of thing. And I feel like there's a really good opportunity for future training, perhaps, Chris, that, to do some sort of OPSEC training, sort of like, professionalism sort of thing for CRM archaeologists.
Well, one simple thing, and I remember writing a blog post about this a long time ago, and perhaps I'll try to find that, but it was really about taking photos and sharing smartly on social media. And one of the things that you both mentioned is, watching your background. And it's something people don't think about. If you post your location, first off, don't post your location. But if you post your location and then somebody's like, oh, I know you're in, I'm in Reno, Nevada, and I recognize that mountain in the background, and I can pretty much pinpoint where you're at down at the block right now. And, and I'm showing a projectile point, right? Because you might think you couldn't be able to do that. You might think your friends wouldn't be able to do that, but a lot of people have friends of friends on their posts, and that exponentially opens you up to a whole bunch of people. Heather, you said you had 700 friends. Each one of those 700 friends has friends that can see your posts. So,
exactly.
And that's default for most people, right? So, so there's that, but then there's also when you're working in the field, especially if you're on a sensitive project from a client standpoint or a cultural standpoint, turn off location services for your camera. You don't have to turn it off for your whole phone, but you can go in and dial in and turn it off for your camera app. So your camera app's not recording GPS data with your photos, because depending on where you post those, now Facebook stripped that information out a long time ago when pedophiles were seeing pictures posted by children and then finding their exact location of their homes, and they knew when their parents were gone because they were stalking them. So Facebook strips that out, but other social media services might not. And I was with a company, we were doing a presentation on security and stuff like that at one point, and my colleague took a field photo from the company's website, a well-known archaeology company, and the photo on their website was of an excavation, because they're like, look at us, we do excavations, and it was fantastic. The photo on the website still had the metadata attached to it, and he downloaded it from their website and showed them exactly where that was on the map. And people just don't realize what's being recorded with your photographs. And it's not even about what you actually tell people sometimes or what they can infer from the photograph, but it's in the metadata if the service you're using doesn't strip it. So
yeah. And real quick on that, because I really like using location geotagged photos for work, right? Like, sure. I've got a GPS, like I actually have a standalone camera that has a GPS in it that tags everything, and it's really super useful. On my phone, the main camera, I have that permanently turned off, but I actually have a second camera app that I use for work photos that has it enabled. So like, I don't make the mistake of, is it on? Is it off? Is it on? Like it's compartmentalized. So it makes it harder for me to mistakenly share the wrong photo.
All right. Well, on that note, hopefully we ended with some good advice. I would say that the takeaway from this is you don't have to be crazy about limiting your stuff on social media. You have to acknowledge the presence that you're putting on social media. And if you're okay with it, there's people out there that are fine being boisterous and let's just say it, being an ass on social media, because that's who they are. And maybe they are always getting jobs and they're always in the good old boys network and they have no problem getting work and everybody wants to hire them, then they're going to do whatever they want to do. And to be quite frank, that's their prerogative. But you just have to understand that what you're putting out there is who you are, and legal or not, that's how people are going to see you when you're trying to find a job. Final thought, Bill?
Yeah, you just have to be strategic. That's it. I mean, it's a great tool. Right. If you're strategic, you use it right, it can really help you out.
Indeed. All right. Well, with that, we will exit. And, in the long lines of sharing good stuff on social media, as I mentioned in the end of another segment, share this episode out. Share it to your family and friends. I mean, you share stuff like this. I've been trying to make a point to share all the podcasts that I listen to as well, just to my normal feed. I don't get a chance to listen to them much anymore, but when I do, I try to share them out because it helps support the podcasters and the effort that they're going through to do that. And also it helps educate some other people. If you're getting something out of it, probably somebody else will too. So share this out so other people can benefit and learn and share it in groups. I don't typically share CRM episodes in the Archeo Field Techs group because even though I'm a moderator, these groups get weird and it's always seems self-serving, even though it's serving the group. But I feel like I can't share it as the host of the APN. And I don't share anything over there typically, unless I really think it fits, because people on social media are crazy. So anyway, but you can share it because that's how that works. If you share somebody else's stuff, that's okay, but you can't share your own stuff. It's weird. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. Thanks, guys. And we'll be back next time. We're getting dangerously close to 200 episodes. I don't know if we're going to pull something out for that, but we're getting close to a big milestone. Yeah. So, all right. We'll see you guys later. That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.arcpodnet.com/CRMArcPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at arcpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Go out into the world and be kind, everyone.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.